Hey everyone, so this is my labor and delivery story. It has been a long time coming, but finally I've gotten around to do it. So basically what started off was, since Mila was born on June 15th, on June 14th, I was, according to my doctor's due date, which was June 11th, I was overdue 3 days. So the day before, so not the 14th, on the 13th, so June 13th, so 2 days before Mila was born, I went in and in the morning for my appointment, and they did a membrane sweep. And she told me she was going to do a really aggressive membrane sweep because I did not want to be induced. Absolutely not. I wanted to go into labor naturally on my own. I was induced with Eva and I didn't want to go through that again. I didn't want to have the really painful contractions, and I wanted to see what it would be like to actually go into labor on my own. So she did the membrane sweep, and 100% it was a very aggressive membrane sweep, and it wasn't very painful, but it was definitely uncomfortable. So, and I got stretched and everything, and at that point I was about 4 centimeters dilated, and I was 100% effaced, and the baby I think was at station 1 or something like that, or -1. I'm not 100% sure on that though. So anyway, I went home and we went for lots of walks and were really active, and I tried to keep busy around the house, and I was dancing and doing all kinds of stuff trying to induce myself, but nothing was happening. So I kind of just came to terms that baby would arrive and she was good and ready. So the next day we did the same thing again. We went for a long walk along the beach and we took Eva out and we just had a nice day together. And then we came home and I made dinner and I was doing laundry, and I just all of a sudden had a really sore back. So I kept saying to Steve, like, either this is like some kind of cruel torture, because this is like the most painful backache I've ever had, or I'm going into labor. And I try not to keep my hopes up, and I didn't keep my hopes up because I just assumed that, you know, this was just me going, you know, going into false labor or false contractions or whatever, or just Braxton Hicks, or, you know, it wasn't the real deal. So I didn't really worry about it too much. And then about 9 or 10 o'clock, I think it was, I did start to have contractions, but the contractions were definitely manageable. So we watched a movie and then went to bed, and I was pretty uncomfortable at that point. But I managed to go to sleep, and then I remember, I think it was about maybe about 12 o'clock. I woke up at 12 o'clock, this is AM, and I just felt weird and I was still having contractions, so I went back to sleep. And then I kept waking up every time I had a contraction. But my contractions were far apart. My contractions were like an hour apart, so I was getting almost an hour of sleep through before each contraction. So at that point, again, still very manageable. Painful, but manageable. Well, at 5 in the morning, I woke up, and then my contractions started to get closer together, and they were quite painful. Still, again, I still found them to be manageable, so that was good. But I went in and I said to Steve, like, these contractions are getting stronger, so I think that this might be it, but it could be a while, I don't know. So I said, like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and then I'm gonna go and have something to eat and like have a cup of tea and like relax and see if they go away, maybe take a bath. Well, I went into the bathroom and I stood up because I like felt kind of a weird feeling, and then I looked down and I noticed that I'd lost my mucus plug, and there was a lot of blood along with my mucus plug. And then basically as I stood up, then my contractions started to get really bad. So I said to Steve, like, this is it. I just know it. I just know that this is it. So at this point, my contractions were still about, I would say, 6 or 7 minutes apart. But they were lasting about 45 to 50 seconds at a time. So I told Steve to call my dad and to tell my dad to come and be on his way, because we were going to need him to look after Eva as soon as I needed to go to the hospital, and I wanted him to be there and ready when I needed to go. So I decided at that point to call my doctor and tell her what was going on. And then they told me to call labor and delivery and let them know that I would be coming in, but maybe not for a little while. So she said to me at that point, like, can you talk through your contractions? And I was like, yeah, I can. And it was about 6 o'clock at this point in the morning. So she said, well, when you can't talk through your contractions, then come in. But until that point, you can just stay at home. So I started to do laundry and make breakfast and make beds and do all that kind of stuff, and, you know, play with Eva and watch a movie with Eva on the couch. And then my contractions are getting closer and closer together. And at this point, they were about 3 to 5 minutes apart. Now this is about 7 o'clock. So then I said to Steve, like, we should probably go. Well, my dad hadn't arrived yet, because my dad lives almost 2 hours away from us. So we called Steve's stepmom, who lives quite close, and asked if she would come, because I knew I was going to be needing to go pretty quickly. So she came and arrived at about 7:30, and at that point I was still doing laundry, but I was in a lot of pain and I was finding it really hard to talk. I was managing the pain really well, but it was still very painful. I was doing a lot of sitting on the exercise ball, getting Steve to kind of rub my back and walking through and just kind of breathing through everything. So she got there at, yeah, it was about 7:30. We left at about 7:40. It took us like probably 3 or 4 minutes to get me in the car. We already had everything packed into the car ready to go, and then we got in and drove to the hospital. So I arrived at the hospital at about 10 to 8. And Steve drove to the wrong part of the hospital, so there was no wheelchairs there, so I had to walk myself all the way up to labor and delivery, with him of course. But at that point I was having to like stop constantly because of contractions, and they were very painful at this point. And I remember going into the elevator and just being like, I can't believe this, I can't believe this, I don't have a wheelchair and I'm in labor. And you know, and the elevator was full of people and men, so that was kind of funny. So anyway, we went to labor and delivery, and I walked up to the counter there, and my doctor turned around and she's like, Kelsey, and I'm like, yeah. I'm like, let's have this baby. And she just started to laugh, and she's like, yeah, like, how far apart are you or contractions? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna have the baby now. And I knew at that point, this is about 8 o'clock, I knew that I was either, I don't know, at least 8 centimeters, I thought, dilated, but getting right close to being ready to push. Because I remember with Eva being 7-8 centimeters and feeling like, you need to push already. And I was feeling like that. So she said, well, let's lay you down, like, just examine you and see, like, exactly, you know, what stage you're at. So anyway, she examined me and had the nurse come in, and I was thrilled to see that the nurse that we had was actually the same nurse that I had when I delivered Eva. So that was awesome. So she examined me, and then she was like totally in shock, because she did not believe me, I don't think, and that I was almost 8 centimeters dilated. And she said to me, now what did you want to do for pain control? And I was like, well, I wanted to have an epidural. And she said, like, I can call for an epidural, but I don't think that you are going to make it for that epidural. So I kind of like thought about it. I'm like, yeah, okay, like, I've gotten this far. I know I can do this. You know, women have been doing this for years and years and years and years, hundreds of years, and haven't had, you know, before epidurals and all that, and they were able to give birth to their babies. So I can do this. I know I can do this. And I was feeling really, really good and really strong and really motivated to do it all natural. So they said to me, like, we should put an IV, we need to put an IV in you, which I did not want at that point. I said to them, I don't want an IV, like, why do I need to have an IV? And they were like, well, you know, just in case, it's kind of like a lifeline, we have to give you an IV. So I was like, okay, whatever, so give me an IV. So they gave me an IV, and I'm like still texting on my phone and updating like you guys on Facebook, and I'm talking on the phone. And then my doctor checks me again, and then I was 9, almost 10, and this is about 5 minutes later. And then about 5 minutes after that, I said I was pushing, and I was pushing. There was nobody there with me except Steve, but I was pushing. Then at that point, I said to Steve, like, you gotta go back to the car. Because we didn't bring any bags up, because Steve was trying to help me get upstairs. So I was like, you have to go to the car, you have to get the camera. So He ran to the car and got out the camera, came right back up. At that point they had me ready and were ready to push. My doctor had to have gone into, she went into a room to do a C-section, and she actually had to leave because she wanted, there was another doctor there, and there was an OB and stuff there as well. So she said, you know, she wanted to be with me. So she came in, and she was all ready to go. Like really good. My doctor was like absolutely fantastic. So at that point we started doing practice pushes, and they said that I pushed really well. So they were pleased at that, and they could tell that I knew how to push, and I knew I could feel her. Well, of course I could feel everything because I didn't have anything, but I could feel her moving down, so I could really concentrate. At that point I was trying really hard not to push with my face, which when you're in labor, I'm sure if you've given birth before and you haven't had an epidural, it's very hard not to push in your face, especially when there is pain. So that was difficult for me, but I managed to not do too bad. But I do have like a few blood vessels that burst like all around my nose and underneath my eyes, which they've improved, but that was from pushing and just pushing so much in my face. So then at this point, Steve and myself and the nurse and the doctor were all in there, I'm pushing and I'm pushing and I'm pushing. And it felt like the baby was stuck. Like I felt like that. And I felt like I had this intense urge to pee. Like just intense. But I couldn't release the pee. And the doctor said to me, she felt like the way that Mila was positioned was not a good position for birth. She was positioned, I think it's posterior, I don't remember, I think, but facing the wrong direction, the direction you wouldn't want, but at a bit of an angle. So she said she may be applying a lot of pressure on my bladder, and that was why I was unable to pee. So I kept pushing, and they were trying to like help me to rotate the baby, because the baby at this point is almost getting close to crowning. So they're trying to help me, and then I'm like going on my side, and then I'm going on my hands and knees, and then I'm sitting up, and then I'm standing up and pushing a little bit, just not enough to push the baby out, but to help the baby move. Well, all of a sudden I am on my back, and they were like giving me a break for a second and giving me some oxygen, and I pushed, and the baby pushed out a lot, but my bladder like exploded. It felt like I just like peed everywhere, peed all over the doctor, all over the nurse, all over Steve, all over everything. But nobody cared, and you know, it was good. And at this point, by the way, because you're all gonna ask when did my water break, my water hadn't broken yet. So I'm still pushing, then they can see the baby's head, but they can see the sac still there. So then they started to push on the sac, and one more push and my water bag broke. So finally that broke, and this was the serious pushing. So I'm pushing again, pushing, taking breaks for some oxygen, because at this point I was like, even though I hadn't really actually been in active labor for like maybe not even 2 hours, I was still exhausted. I had been through weeks and weeks of having contractions, so I was exhausted at this point. So pushing and pushing and pushing, and then finally her head was coming out, and feeling her head come out was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life, much more painful than the contractions. And I just remember my legs like shaking so badly when that was. So I'm pushing and pushing and pushing. Finally, you know, the baby's come out, turning the baby, doing whatever they have to do there, and then I remember one more push, and then she was out. And they put her down, of course, she came out, and the doctor quickly looked at her and then put her on my chest. And I remember I had like a sports bra on, and they just like cut up my sports bra, ripped it off to do skin to skin. And then we did cord clamping, like we delayed the cord clamping. So we delayed that for quite a while while she was doing skin to skin. And then Steve got to cut the cord, and they cleaned her all off and everything, and then brought her back to me. So she was born on June 15th at, what was it, 9:13 a.m. So I arrived at 7:45, like 7:50 a.m. and she was born at 9:15. So my labor and delivery was very quick, just like it was at the VEDO, less than 3 hours. So that was amazing. And it was also amazing to have a 100% drug-free natural birth. And definitely if we ever had another baby, or if I ever had another baby, I would 100% have a natural birth with no drugs, because my recovery and everything and the way I felt after I gave birth was just much better. So after that, after she was born and everything, and then we had about half an hour of skin to skin before they took her away. And then they took her off me, cleaned her up, gave her back to me, and then I fed her immediately. So that was about 40 minutes after she was born. So that was great, and she latched on okay to start with. But if you watch my breastfeeding video, you'll know that she was tongue-tied. So I did have a little bit of problems with her latching. She just had a bit of a shallow latch. So yeah, so that's what happened there. And then after that, and then of course I delivered the placenta and everything, and my placenta was very, very healthy, they said, and everything was good. Mila was perfect, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, and 20¼ inches long. And she's just the perfect baby. And she's just, oh, I just can't, you know, gush enough about her, because she's just so sweet and just such a good baby. So, and then after that, well, what happened? I guess after then all of that, it was about an hour and a half after I gave myself a shower and I was walking around, and then I got dressed and put makeup on, and they took me back to the postpartum ward, and I stayed in the ward there. So there was another woman in my rooms, but there was only 2 of us, so that was okay. I was only there for 24 hours. So that was nice. And I had no stitches because I didn't tear. I had no abrasions or anything there. So that was great. So I'm extremely lucky to have had such a, I guess I'm not going to say easy labor, but such a quick labor and a healthy baby at the end of it. So if you have any questions for me, put them below and I will answer them in my question and answers video. Thanks so much for watching.